Welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast with me, Sam Harris, your host. I invite fascinating humans from all walks of life to share their wisdom and unpack their mindsets and formulas for growth. Hello and welcome to the Growth Mindset Podcast. I am very excited for the interview today with Elizabeth Tweedale. She is the CEO and founder of CypherCoders, UK's leading coding school for children, as well as a highly experienced AI creator, author, and entrepreneur who has written 6 books, which is 6 more than myself. And do want to ask her a bit about that. And generally, she's just sort of lived a very awesome life. She comes from, I haven't already forgotten, you said Iowa?
Yep.
Yes.
Right.
Iowa in the States, and now lives in London, starting awesome businesses and helping people learn to code and hopefully live a more creative digital life. So Elizabeth, welcome to the show.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, it's my pleasure. So I've given you a bit of an introduction, but it would be nice to hear in your own words a little bit of your initial story of like where you came from, what kind of things you're interested in as a child, and how that like manifested into where you then went with your life.
Sure, great. Well, as you mentioned, I'm from Middle America, so growing up in Iowa, but I'd say I was always an entrepreneur at heart ever since a young child. I used to sort of make up businesses at school with my friends, like making friendship bracelets or putting on makeup, things, kids do, but I always just tried to figure out how to monetize it. So that was sort of always at the heart of what I did. And then it became the time when you're thinking about, okay, well, what should I do with my life? What do I want to be? And I had always really loved creative industries and been really passionate about art and design and those kinds of things. So I was kind of going between fashion designer or architect, but also potentially creativity in medicine with plastic surgery because my whole family was in medicine. So it took a while to narrow those things down, but I sort of finalized on architecture. And I thought, that's something that I really love because I think that people having a home is the most important thing. That's where I kind of was at that time. And thought when entering university, I don't want to do architecture school for 7 years because it's quite a long haul to become an architect. So I thought, well,
Yes.
what would be the things to study in undergrad that might help me become an architect later? So I studied math and art. Makes sense. You need both sides of the brain to be an architect. But one of my first math classes was actually for the degree was Computer Science 101. And I absolutely loved it. It just made so much more sense to me than maths because there wasn't just one way to solve a problem. I remember the first program that we had to turn in, you actually had to print out on paper with a very specific typeface and font size so that they could actually count the words and lines and everything. And the teacher went through all of the packs of papers that had been turned in and failed everyone else and passed me because I had only turned in 2 sheets of paper. So I had solved this problem in, 2 sheets of code instead of like 5 sheets or 10 sheets. And after that, I was sold. I was like, okay, this is awesome. There's no one answer, but whoever kind of figures out this problem in the best way is going to be the winner. I was a
Nice.
big gamer, so that really spoke to me. But it was really interesting because I ended up being the only girl in computer science. So I had changed my major and I was really focused on computer science. I was the president of the Computer Science Society. But on the other side was also president of my sorority, which is a big thing in America, and captain of the cheerleading team. So kind of these 2 separate worlds that were sort of at odds with each other. And I was surrounded by these brilliant women in my sorority that had, these amazing sort of business minded ways of thinking and articulating themselves that were so impressive to me. And I thought, why aren't these kinds of people in computer science as well? It just seemed really strange. And so that always sort of stuck with me. But then progressing forward, I did do my master's in architecture and I was working at some of the leading architecture practices here in London and found a lot of my contemporaries trying to teach themselves how to code. And it was always really a struggle because they were learning a specific language such as Python to solve a very specific problem. But because they didn't have that base foundation of computer science, and how kind of the bigger scale of technology all fits together, it was super frustrating and they weren't really going anywhere. So I took kind of everywhere that I was at that time, which was 2013, and I was a mother of two at that point, and thought computer science is something that everyone needs to learn, and we also need to make it much more accessible to both girls and boys at a really young age. And that's when I started teaching children how to code. So that was in early 2013, and have sort of progressed from there. So that's where Cypher, which is what I run now, teaches children between the age of 6 and 12 how to code during their school holidays, after school programs, weekly lessons, things like that. But the really exciting thing about it is that it just goes back to those experiences I had as a child and even in university, and seeing how do we actually engage people in computer science and change the way that we're actually teaching it so more people are interested. So we use creative themes like conservation or fashion. So I love that. Or architecture to get more kids interested. So we have 52% of our students are girls, which is wonderful. And we just get so many enthusiastic young people heading for a profession that historically has been very isolating to a very specific type of predominantly male, but also a very specific type of person. So it's just widening that for the future.
Nice, that's awesome. Thanks so much for the context. I have some parallels and complete differences with your life. I certainly did a lot of entrepreneurial things as a kid and stuff. And then I really wanted to study art and something creative at uni, but then never felt like I should. It didn't feel relevant. So I kind of just did civil engineering initially. But I had like a gap year and I'm kind of dyslexic and have ADHD and stuff. And so I'd forgotten most of like how to do anything difficult in maths by the time I got there, and was trying to learn all these algebra and stuff. And everyone was like way better than me. And
Yeah.
but then they did like a similar sort of assignment thing where we had to work out what's the speed the Earth needs to be turning at for something to like lift off it. And the first person to get their answer in was going to win like a bottle of wine from like the guy doing it. And I was really good at like physics and mechanics and stuff, and I worked it out within like 5 minutes with like basically 5 lines of working. I was always good at that kind of thing. Put in my answer, and he was like, "Oh, I think you just googled it. You cheated." I'm like, "What? The one thing I'm good at, I don't even get any
No,
credit for.
it's
All
the
the stuff I'm bad
dyslexic
at, I just
brain.
fail at." And so I was like, "I don't think this is for me." And then we did a lot of like safety analysis of content, concrete and stuff. So I kind of abandoned civil engineering and went and studied biology, and that was fun because yeah, they were nice to me and stuff.
But I think that's a really interesting point. And we have a lot of students in Cypher that are dyslexic or have
Mm,
ADHD or things like that. But that's why computer science is so engaging, because
yeah,
there
yeah,
is no one way to solve the problem. And
exactly.
I mean, I'm really dyslexic, and my whole family and all my kids are now, of course. But actually, it gives you a different way of looking at how to solve the problem, so you can
Mm,
solve it much more quickly and not in the typical standard A plus
yeah,
B
yeah,
equals C, but
definitely.
actually you kind of know where A is sort of, and then you see C over there, and you already know what B is. It's
Yeah, yeah,
amazing.
you're getting, after you find you have a bit more like a broader picture of things, you can kind of just see different ways of stuff. So I really, really enjoyed, I got into coding later, and I love doing algorithms and sort of working out different ways to do those things. And yeah, I
Absolutely.
wasn't the president of the sorority thing, but I was vice president of the breakdance society, but
Well, that's
didn't
very
have the urge
cool.
to teach any of them to code. But I then I did learn to code on Founders and Coders, if you've heard of that.
Oh,
Um,
okay.
but they only have 50% women, and it's a free coding course for adults to get into coding and change their career industry stuff. And they do focus more on diverse individuals and things, and it's really cool. So I feel like you should know them, and I will probably introduce you to them
Yes,
just because
please,
they're great.
definitely. And is it self-led courses or
Uh,
live
it's
online?
like peer, so it's like a boot camp,
Yeah,
but the people that did the course last 3 months come and then teach a week of this course.
very cool.
In London it's free, but then they had some Israel campuses and things. So I am not a diverse. I'm just a white guy, but I ended up going to Israel because they needed a few people to go out each time to kind of help them because they study in English. So they try and have some English people out there that can kind of help them and stuff. So I also like taught them some things because I was a bit more advanced as a coder anyway. So because I didn't really need to be on the program so much, but I kind of wasn't sure what I was doing with my life and felt like
Yeah,
learning to code and running around
you
Israel
like
for
to
a
get
bit
the
and helping people.
foundations in.
Yeah, it's nice. And went out to Palestine. They've got some campuses out there as well. So it was really fun.
Oh. My most recent book, How to Code 2.0, I did not choose the title. It's very 1990s.
Surely you should be
But
allowed to do
it
that.
was
But
really interesting that they translated into like 7 or 8 different languages. And I found it fascinating because the publishers would come back and they would say, well, which pieces can we translate and which pieces have to stay in English? And I think that's one of the amazing things about coding as well, is that it is a global language, but
mm,
it's quite funny if you read code from different people around the world, because they will obviously change the variable names, but the context and the structure is oftentimes English, if, then, and else
yeah,
statements,
yeah,
they're all written in English. And so then translating comments versus variables and being able to actually read someone else's code in a different language is fascinating to me, because I don't speak any other languages, but I can read
yeah.
code in German or in Russian. And
Mm.
it's like the way to bring all of these different cultures and things together.
Yeah, that's really interesting. So
Amazing.
certainly a harder one to wrap your head around because I
Wrap your head
found
around.
it kind of challenging. So I was never great at learning languages anyway. Around the I sort of forget some of the words and things, but I loved the structure and
Yeah.
yeah, general logic behind stuff, which is nice. But yeah, I thought I've always heard like Russian coders are really good at things, but I haven't spoken to many of them or reviewed their code that
Yes.
much.
Well, it's interesting because
Mm.
in a lot of Eastern European countries, computer science is already part of their national curriculum. So they start
Yeah,
learning at a very young age, just as a base foundation within the educational system, which I think is amazing,
yeah,
because then you churn out a lot more
definitely.
proficient
The same way,
coders.
we've been teaching kids like to learn a language as part of
Yeah.
their early stages. It
Yeah.
sort of makes sense, and probably more useful to be learning code than to be learning Latin as a
I
child.
mean, I would vote for that, but
Yeah, big
definitely.
time. Interesting. When you're doing different languages, you sort of try and make your code as like to tell a story as much as possible, so you don't have so many comments and like that you just understand what like the functions do by the name of the function and stuff. How did you get around translating that?
Um,
It's like some
that's really,
languages, it's like it takes like 2 sentences to say what is 2 words in English, and you're like, what the hell is going on?
yes. I mean, I think it's an interesting point that you bring up about like, the quality of code.
Yeah.
And when teaching children how to code, we use a language called Scratch, which is a block-based programming language. So it's
Mm.
essentially, you could think of Lego bricks that have code already inside them that you can stack together in a virtual world. So it gets over that hurdle of children not being able to type proficiently. And when you're starting to learn how to code using that kind of structure, you don't actually have the option to write bad code, for lack of better
Yeah. I mean, so you just
articulation. But the fundamental principles of how code is structured and how code is written is inherently inside these blocks. So what we've seen is that children then progress from that and transition to text-based languages. So we transition them to, JavaScript, Python, obviously websites with HTML, CSS, and make them come alive with JavaScript. But our students now can go into other people's code and they can actually pick out the difference between, oh, that's really good code and that's really bad code. And I think it really just boils down to the fact that their initial training was in a language that couldn't have poorly written code and was
yeah.
all inherently understood by even just the color of the block. So in Scratch, movement blocks, for example, are dark blue. And so when you're reading through the code, those blocks are colored differently. And it's similar to, text-based coding
Mm.
where variables stand out or conditional statements, things like that. And it just prepares kids to understand inherently good code versus bad code, because like you brought up, it's the worst thing going into someone else's code base and not being able to figure out what that piece
Yeah.
of coding is doing. But teaching commenting, I think, is a whole nother interesting level that, doesn't necessarily come naturally, but is a perfect thing to integrate into the development of computer science and the synergies between even just English classes. Because when we start to talk about commenting with our students and they're like 11, they're like, okay, yes, I know how to actually structure a good sentence or make this understandable
Mm.
for the reader, which is the
Big
same
time.
kinds of things that they're being told in their English lessons and their, creative writing lessons, things like that. So pulling those synergies when they're already learning them at the same time in school is the perfect way to just lay a really solid foundation for them for their futures. And it's not for us to create, a world of little computer scientists. That's slightly ridiculous. Obviously, all the Russians aren't computer scientists, even though they might have learned it in primary school. But just having that base level of understanding, as I'm sure being a founder of computer science and technology and how it works, is at the heart of all
Yeah,
industries and the future of everything. So it's such an
definitely.
important thing to focus on. And yes, probably more important than learning Latin
Yeah, yeah.
in this
I
day
think
and
it's
age.
the same way that like it's important to learn history to understand like how the world was shaped around you. Is sort of computer science is learning very much how the digital world is shaped around you, which
Yeah.
is pretty fundamental for the rest of the future. Which is why I studied biology and didn't do computer science, but my first business was kind of like Deliveroo before Deliveroo, and like it went really well, but I couldn't really sort of scale it. Also, I made some mistakes with business partners and like basically every mistake possible. And I had no idea how to raise funding or anything.
Yeah.
But like, had I understood more about computer science, I maybe could have built the Deliveroo app like 2 years
The app.
before they'd even started, and life would have been great. And so I was a bit annoyed after that, in that like,
Yeah,
okay,
but then you
the world
took the
is
steps to fix
tech
it
stuff. Yeah,
and
exactly. So I was like,
then
okay, I
quickly
have to
resolved.
learn tech, and it's definitely just changed the way I can even think creatively about the sorts of businesses that I run, because I just understand what I can and cannot do from a code perspective, and can also talk to developers and actually understand what I'm asking, which is super
Yes.
useful. And now talking to you, I'm a bit like, oh, I kind of enjoy coding. I wish I had some more time to do things. As soon as I start doing it, I probably go a bit nuts again. But the algorithm side was great. The whole DevOps and other stuff. Oh my god, not my favorite.
I mean, it's always going to be a certain type of person, isn't it? But it's
Yeah, yeah.
the point that you brought up, that you can at least speak their language and talk to them,
Mm,
is really important part of it. I've had, quite a few friends starting their own businesses in previous accelerators and things, and it's just understanding the fundamentals of the fact that the cloud is not actually in the clouds. Or
yeah.
it's, a set of databases that are actually located somewhere that store the information, and just even the broader context of how technology fits together, and being able to articulate that at least a little bit, to speak the language of those people that are writing your programs and your apps and things that are actually at the heart of a lot of people's businesses now, is where we all need to get
Mm.
to.
These days, small business owners are busier than ever. Spending time researching for the right candidates can feel like you're taking time away from growing your business. So that's why LinkedIn Jobs has made it easier to find the people you want to talk to faster and for free. I've saved a ton of time myself, and we've had great candidates through LinkedIn Jobs, and so can you. Create a free job post in minutes on LinkedIn Jobs to reach your network and beyond. You can reach the world's largest professional network of over 770 million people with one post. Isn't that awesome? So just focus on the candidates with the right skills for yourself, and use screening questions to get your role in front of only the most qualified people. And then use the simple tools on LinkedIn Jobs to quickly filter and prioritize who you'd like to interview and hire, and get back to those who you don't want to see, because you should always get back to people, and that's important. So in summary, LinkedIn Jobs will help you find the candidates you want to talk to faster. Did you know that nearly every week, nearly 40 million job seekers visit LinkedIn? So post your job for free at linkedin.com/growth. That's GROWTH. LinkedIn.com/growth to post your job for free. Terms and conditions apply. To be more explicit, I do think learning to code really requires a good growth mindset. And what are some of the mindsets that you've recognized with people that do a good job of learning to code? And what do you do to teach people the right mindsets when they are learning to code, to make sure they kind of do a good job of it?
It's a great question. I think there's sort of two parts for me with growth mindset and coding. Number one is that children inherently are little computer scientists. They're little experimenters. They naturally have a growth mindset because they're growing up. Everything in their world is changing constantly. And that's one of those things that if we can just bottle it and harness that power into adulthood, we would all have growth mindsets. So when learning how to code, children inherently use things like loops or repeat they repeat here, repeat there. And it comes really naturally to them because they accept experimentation and they accept failure. And I think this is something that's bred out of us in the schooling system, both, American and English schooling systems with testing and things like that, is how do we keep that curiosity alive and keep that experimentation and the knowledge that it's okay to fail alive. And by doing coding, that's an easy way because, like I said at the beginning, there's no one way to solve a problem. There's no one algorithm that's the right algorithm. You can throw a problem at 10 children and get 10 different answers. The other side that I think is really interesting is that gaming has a high correlation to typical coders. I mean, I was a gamer growing up, and that's how I initially sort of made connections with my computer science classmates. Was they all thought I was the weird girl in the corner. But then as soon as we started playing, Madden together or Tony Hawk Pro Skater, very old school games, I was accepted as like one of
that.
one of the crew, one of the team. And so I thought, what is it actually about gaming that has that link to computer science? And it's really simple for me. I mean, even go back to like Mario, the first Mario, loved, is that you won't pass the first level the first time you play the game, right? I mean, otherwise, what would be the fun of it? In gaming, we actually get used to failing and trying again and just doing it a little bit better the next time. And it really empowers us to be the best at certain parts of the game, especially if you take something like, Tony Hawk, which is a skateboarding video game, which I know you know, but others might not. You might be really good at like flip tricks, or you might actually just be super amazing on rails just because of how your brain sees the movements and sees the buttons and sees the problem solving. And that really correlates to computer science. You have to be super, patient because code oftentimes doesn't work, just like real life, just like being an entrepreneur. And knowing that you can do it, or having those tiny wins and taking pride and joy in those tiny wins every time a program does execute or doesn't, is really important for a growth mindset, obviously, but also is trained into those people learning computer science from scratch,
Ooh,
I guess.
That's great. Very happy I asked that question. I definitely agree. And it is, yeah, it's perfect. That's why I said like you really do need a growth mindset for doing it, because it is, you're basically seeking failure. As soon as you finally have like done something, you kind of should celebrate your success, but you're straight on to the next thing of like failing. So like 90% of your time as a coder is failing and doing stuff that doesn't work, probably, especially whilst you're learning. I mean, once you become like a super experienced developer after like 6 years and stuff, like maybe most of what you do should work pretty quickly, but you're still going to always have like bugs and things. And you have to really learn to deal with failure and basically just keep on going. And being able to sort of recognize when you're like hitting a brick wall as well, but not give up. And I found often like there's lots of sort of different tips, like the rubber duck philosophy and things, of just sort of being able to like explain what it is that you're doing wrong. And often you'll find like you're doing something, and if you ask someone a question, you'd be like, well, I've got to this far and I'm doing it this way, and like what I should have done is I should have just written it like this, but like should I go back and I should just go back and like rewrite it from the start and do it that way. But you kind of keep on going because you kind of already invested some time into something, and it's kind of funny.
Yeah, and I think there's a lot of great learnings from that rubber duck example. So the duck that programmers often use just to talk out their problems. But I've always had the most success in paired programming. You end up
100%.
Producing at least 3 times as many codes as you would before. And I think that also, speaks to a great growth mindset, but also collaboration, which is really important to instill in children. And at Cypher, that's why all of our classes are group classes, so that children learn how to articulate their problems and communicate with their classmates in order to produce a better outcome. And it's in the kind of failing and being able to articulate your own problem that you can then learn from it and grow from it. Again, a lot of synergies between the growth mindset and just debugging programs, right? It's knowing that you're always going to run up against a brick wall. It's inevitable, but how do you actually come away from that? How do you find the help that you need? And the other thing that I find interesting about computer science, or coders in general is that, people have this stereotype of us sitting in a black room with like a green
Yeah.
code rolling
Matrix stuff
across
I'll
the
have to
screen
answer
and just
for. And
literally
yeah.
typing code. But that's not actually how it is. The best coders are actually just really good Googlers. And
Yeah.
if we can take that same kind of understanding and put it towards a growth mindset of knowing that there are other people that have solved this problem out there and not over Googling things
Mm.
because that is its own set of issues, but knowing where to go for help or inspiration or to just get you to the next level of where you are in your life at that time and where you want to go. Most of the code that's out there in the world today has been reused by other people, refixed, regurgitated, and that is coding. It's bringing all of these pieces together that you kind of know exist out there and then
Mm.
fitting it together in your own way to solve your unique problem.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's also very entrepreneurial, right? If you were McDonald's, you might not never have started because there was already a hamburger company, right? But there's a hamburger company, so I can do another hamburger company, but I'm going to do a little bit differently. I'm going to do it a little bit better, and this is how my business is going to thrive because I am a problem solver in a different way,
Yeah.
and can grow and change
Yeah. Nice.
accordingly.
We definitely love the people at Founders and Coders because they're very much all about like pair programming, and sort of most of what they do is pair programming, which is great. And then also project based learning. So instead of just sort of copying like exactly what someone else has done to build the same thing, you very much have to like think of something you want to build and sort of create it, and then you go and find like different elements from everywhere else to work out how to create it. But you have to build your own thing, which is where you actually sort of learn to actually kind of do the coding thing, which is the same with like learning a language. As in, if you just sort
Yeah.
of read off sentences and things, you don't get that far. It's when you sort of actually try and talk to someone, you have to sort of work out how to find your own words and do things. It's where sort of the learning really
Yeah.
sort of
Get immersed
goes
in
deep.
the
Yeah,
culture,
yeah.
go and live in France to learn
Mm.
French.
I'm delighted today to be supported by Wealthfront. If you want to invest for the long term, it helps to invest on your terms. Maybe you're a pro-solar, cannabis supporter, mental health advocate, or an emerging market crypto nerd, kind of like I am, or maybe you're not, but whoever you are, you should invest in what you believe in, and that's what makes Wealthfront so great. In just minutes, you can get started with Wealthfront's classic portfolio, or you can make things custom with the investments you care about most. Wealthfront even offers a socially responsible portfolio, which is a mix of funds built around human rights, climate change, and sustainability. Wealthfront is super easy to personalize, so you can tweak your portfolio to match the things that you care about, like crypto trusts or energy funds and cannabis and hundreds of options more. So no matter what you're into, Wealthfront will help you build wealth responsibly and protect you from making silly mistakes like going all in on some bad advice from Reddit, which I maybe have done before. Best of all, Wealthfront is totally automated. They do all the trading, all the rebalancing, and they even help you lower your tax bill as you invest. It's streamlined, it's effortless, and it works like a charm. Or at least, it works like really exceptional software. So, get your first $5,000 managed completely for free at wealthfront.com/growth mindset. Start building your wealth today at wealthfront.com/growth mindset. That is wealthfront.com/growth mindset.
How have you gone and started businesses? What are like the mindsets and things that you've learned there, and any comparisons that you've had from your coding experience that you think helped you?
Well, I think in terms of mindset, I think one of the trickiest things that I've had to kind of overcome is the difference between being a co-founder or a solo founder. So previously,
Interesting.
I've co-founded quite a few businesses, which is always great. And with Cypher, I took the decision that I want to be a solo founder. And that was a really
Wow.
tough transition for me because
Yeah.
I know how important it is to have that support network around you. But instead of just saying, okay, well, I'm just going to find somebody just to be the token co founder, I thought, what is it in a co founder that actually makes a business successful? And it's the expertise that you don't have. And so, right from the onset, instead of thinking, oh, I just need to grab somebody that could be the one, I said, what are my skill sets that I need to pull up or that I need to be better on? And who are the people that are the best at those things? And that's where I came from when founding Cypher. So being a solo founder and not having a co-founder is lonely, but actually it's amazing because I've built up a strategy team around me that are better at me at things than I am. So, my COO, who I mentioned earlier, previously ran the NatWest Business Accelerator. So is also just on the side an amazing coach because that's where she came from. But prior to that, she was an events coordinator. She's like an operational guru. I mean, I love operations, but she's at a whole nother level. And then our CFO, Caroline, again, give me a spreadsheet. I love spreadsheets, but I'm definitely not an accountant and
Yes.
definitely not 100% with the P&L, but I love it. But, she came from Monzo. She was their third finance hire, and she just is phenomenal. And similarly, we have a chief product officer, Paul, who's previously built his own tech companies, exited, worked at one of the biggest online tutoring agencies in the UK, was there working out all of their product. So again, bringing this whole skill set that even though I could do it, it's just having somebody that's their whole life, that's their whole passion, and having them alongside you kind of has made it almost a better experience to not have to be alone at the top, if that makes sense. So that was one of my biggest kind of growth mindset shifts in like previous businesses versus setting up Cypher.
Yeah, that's a big mindset shift. Wasn't it what I was really expecting you to about it all, but it's certainly something that I've struggled with. Is in my first business was solo founder, and then I was at uni, and like I said, didn't have like a coding thing, so I was trying to run a logistics business without any technical support, and it was chaos. So I ended up getting a co-founder who had like run accountancy stuff before and was pretty successful, but he was very much keen on he had all the right skills, but then I gave him 50% of the business, but he was looking for like a lifestyle business, and just he enjoyed organizing the things and doing a lot of cycling, which was great for where I was at for like that next year. But then the year afterwards, when I was like ready to scale up and was doing deals with like DHL and the NHS for other stuff, and really wanted to like expand this business and like raise funding and build apps and things, and he was like, nah, let's just keep it at like this sort of 10-person level. And he was the one that like organized all my actual logistics at that point, so I couldn't really like do things that he didn't want to do, and I was a bit like screwed. So I fired around for a year.
That's the exact thing that happened to me actually because I previously co-founded a business teaching children how to code, which I exited from, and it was that key thing of a lifestyle business versus a scalable business that's inherently different for different people, obviously, and for different reasons. But I have always set out to build a business that can scale, and so having that mindset I think that's really unique, and it's something that not a lot of founders necessarily have, because you're accepting different ways of pushing the business forward. Giving away part of your company to investors is a big decision. I get it. I could easily grow a business teaching children how to code organically because, all my parents recommend to the next parents and those kind of things. But to grow organically is just not going to make you a global company and influence as many children as quickly as what I was willing to accept. So that's why I also transitioned away from co-founder, but to really harness that scalability and that serious growth mindset that is thriving to be a global company and scale, I guess.
Nice.
Yeah.
Certainly good luck with everything. Seems like you did the right thing. It certainly is kind of hard, but without co-founders. But I guess the initial hump is really, really hard as a solo co-founder. But if you already had to like kick things off to the point where you can then like hire experts to sort of do all the bits that you're missing, I feel like that's the hardest part of the solo co-founding thing. But I don't know. Maybe it gets much harder as you get bigger and you've got like crazy big things to deal with. I'm imagining like if you have a board and they've got some equity stake and they could steer you and things, like it's probably okay.
Yeah.
But it's always nice.
That's where your strategy team sort of comes in.
Yeah.
Even before that, I think before I had the funds or anything to hire, I created an advisory board, which were really just like friends and family that I knew had those bits of expertise. So ahead of all three of those positions that I just mentioned, I had people in each of those roles that were just friendly advisors that had done it before themselves, so that I always could kind of go back to them and check in every so often. So I think that's at least something that people
Yeah,
solo founding their own businesses can do, because it doesn't cost you any
definitely.
money, and
It's
most of
harder
us
if
can
you've
do it.
never done it before, you haven't got this sort of
Yeah.
people's around you, which is certainly why doing something like the NatWest Accelerator or Techstars is
Yeah.
a really good thing the first time, even if you maybe don't want to give away like the equity to Techstars. If you just
Yeah.
do it with a load of other entrepreneurs and like have loads of mentors, it just networking is huge. Or you could
Yeah.
start a podcast like me and talk to lots of cool people who maybe carry on like advising you later and stuff. And there are
Yeah.
different ways to get
I
there,
love
but
it.
yes.
Be
Uh,
creative. And that is
yeah,
the
yeah.
growth mindset. Problem solve.
100%, exactly. The other thing that we didn't touch on, I guess, was more like the mindsets around sort of dealing with failure in business and feeling like you're actually the one that should go and do this. Because like female entrepreneurs, there's a lot less of you for a start, and like running a business and things and dealing with the rest of life all at once. Like, how did you develop the confidence to just go and start different businesses, write all these books, and just do your own thing and have the lonely moments of failure and stuff and still carry on? And what like mindsets have you learned to like push yourself besides having a great advisory board and people around you?
Yeah. I think for me, my growth mindset, oftentimes people say, stay open-minded. I think I've heard that on your podcast a few times, and that,
Mm.
just kind of always put yourself out there. But actually, for me, I almost have to protect my mind a bit. So close down a bit, not reach out to too many people. So, perfect example is a lot of founders will look at all of their competition and then weigh it up and down. I do that very selectively. So I know when I'm going to look at my competitive analysis that I put myself in almost like a closed mindset to like block this in at that specific point, so that you don't let those exterior things that are always coming at us get you down. Last night I was at a dinner with a lot of female founders talking about investment, and of course the stat flies around that only 1% of VCs have backed
Yeah,
female founded businesses. I mean,
that's just
10%
nuts.
have backed co-founded, female co-founded businesses, but that's not a very fair stat if you are a solo female founder, because you
Mm.
have, the other guy sitting there next to you. So it's one of those things that can really dampen the growth mindset by having those stats. And so I try to protect myself from that as much as possible. So knowing the things that get you down, and then actively trying to avoid them, or if you do have to approach them, as we all do at points, doing it in a strategic way. So I guess for me, the failures and things like that, which you can't always see coming, but the things that you can see that will get you down and hold you back and hold your growth mindset back, are things that if I can keep them in a little box and only enter that box when I need to, then that's really helpful. Because I think failures in business are inevitable.
Mm.
I mean, it's not that I haven't had a whole business fail, thankfully. I've done fairly well, but there's always little failures every single day. Someone quits, you have to fire someone, something with cash flow, something with taxes. There's always, something with the student, that laptop didn't work. There's always going to be failures in whatever you're doing, and it's actually just how we react to those and how we turn around from that. And for me, it's trying to bottle it and put it in a little box and approach it strategically when I can. It's not always
Yeah,
possible, but it helps to just keep the growth mindset and the optimism alive, and keep those things that might hinder that optimism or growth mindset safely out of the picture as much as
mm.
possible.
Yeah, for sure. I had a good, I think it's like Debbie Millman around like often when you have like something to just go wrong at the start of your day, you kind of already sort of resign yourself to having a bad day. But like compartmentalizing things, as you said, it's really important for entrepreneurialism around like just that thing with the failure, but you can still deal with it and it doesn't affect the rest of things. But then with a day, like she said, you should split your days into quarters and feel like each quarter is a new chance to have like an awesome quarter of the day. And yesterday, three of my four quarters went completely wrong, but I still had a win in the third quarter and really enjoyed it. Actually, the fourth one was pretty good, even though I turned up completely late to a meeting. And yeah, generally most things went wrong yesterday, which is funny, but still managed to have some good wins and was pretty happy at the end of the day. So yeah, being able to like bounce back ability, I think is a really
good term that I learned from Ben Hunt Davis, who was like a gold medal winner when he was like, I think he was 31. It was like his final Olympics, and he'd failed for like his entire life in the Olympic journey all the way up to that, but still managed to sort of win a gold because of his
Yeah.
bounce back ability and don't take things too much. So that was nice. Thank you for that. Is there anything I haven't asked you that I should have asked you?
Um, I mean, I think we talked a bit about the growth mindset of children, which I think is really interesting and how that correlates to computer science. Being a solo founder, we touched a little bit on being a female founder, and then you just asked about how I went about doing all of those things, which
Mm.
I guess I could touch on a little bit more, being a mom of three.
Oh
And
wow.
in the lockdown, we transitioned our whole business from in person to live online. So that was a big shift. I don't know, something around that
Yeah,
maybe.
quite a few
Yeah.
things. Mm. Well, one thing actually I have found being on the complete opposite end of the table of white, privileged, male, middle-aged, who apparently gets all the funding, but don't seem to be seeing any of it yet. A lot of VCs are like, "Oh, there's no women in your business. I'm trying to fund women and stuff." So I actually feel the complete opposite of the stat that you mentioned of, yes, that's a stat, but I don't think that's necessarily a case of people don't want to fund female entrepreneurs. It's more that like people haven't seen it so much as an option, and it has just in some ways like it's just been guys that have wanted to be doing those things. Although I think if it had been more open to women, they would have done it more for sure. So I think it's awareness that it is open to people and having more of you around and things. I don't
Yes.
know if it's impossible. I
I
could be
absolutely
completely
hear
wrong.
you because being on the other side is almost the same sort of problem because then you tell
Yeah,
yourself, well, I should have been funded by now, but I'm not. Whereas I'm
yeah.
coming at it like, well, I need to talk to 100 times more people than my male contemporaries. So that's a big job. But
Interesting.
I think the interesting thing for me is that seeing the difference in it's almost like picking out the stats actually makes everybody feel worse.
Yeah, yeah,
And
exactly.
I found that in a lot of VC meetings, oftentimes I see myself as I'm just ticking their box because they can
Yeah.
now say that they have spoken to a female founded business, but that doesn't actually mean they're listening.
Mm,
And so we're all getting the same problem, right? Like you're getting it
yeah,
from your
yeah.
side, we're getting it from our side. But the thing I find fascinating is how the next generation is coming up and those kind of gender stereotypes are slowly starting to melt away. And we
Mm,
see this in a lot of the projects in the ways that students approach problem solving and working together in computer science and in coding. They're looking at things with a much broader lens that I feel like we did in our generation. You know, when we were growing up, 8-year-old boys and 8-year-old girls were definitely like boys were over there and the girls were over there. And I find it fascinating because early psychology books about the actual brain and the actual behaviors of 6-year olds, 7-year olds, 8-year olds, you know, going up the range, our brains actually develop differently at different points. There's a
mm,
reason why more boy babies walk before girl babies. There's a reason why more girl babies talk before boy babies. Our brains are male and female. And I think as a culture, we need to be able to accept the fact that we are different, but we bring
mm.
different things to the table. And
Yeah,
that's
yeah.
what makes us more powerful. And so
Mm,
the collaboration and the working together of males and females is the most important thing. The brain of 6-year-old boys and girls is a really interesting point because it's almost like when they start to converge and be very similar on the, you know, left brain, right brain side, but then they start to diverge again, right? And it
yeah,
might be
yeah.
at a crucial time when STEM, for example, you know, or math, you know, learning algebra might come more naturally for the brain of an 8-year-old boy versus the brain of an 8-year-old girl. It might just be that
Yeah.
it
But
needs to
also
be taught to girls
girls are
at
maybe better
9.
at other things as well and stuff. And,
Exactly, like, you know,
mm,
the writing skills and vocabulary and things like this. And of course, this is overgeneralizing, but there is a lot of scientific research behind it. So, unless we can then come to the table and say, this is the way that females will pitch their business, which is different to
yeah,
men,
I think
and
yeah,
have VCs
definitely.
understand that. And similarly, for you, knowing that, yes, I don't have a female, but this is how my mindset works and these are where my strengths are, and that should be good enough. So I think we just need to, instead of saying we need to be equal 50-50, actually accept that when it comes to funding, we're going to approach things in a different way. I mean, there's all these stats
100%.
as well about female businesses being less risky for banks to invest in because they're less likely to fail. But women are also more, they often use the term risk adverse, but I think it's more risk aware potentially, or maybe it's just
100%.
less confident to ask for the money. Like you said,
VCs
aren't having
that's
the pitches across their desk. So if we can focus on the underlying fact that there are women starting businesses and there are men starting businesses, if more women need to be funded, then we just need to figure out why they're not asking for money. Or if the men, we also don't want to not fund men that have amazing ideas because they create amazing businesses too. So I hear you. It's a struggle from all sides, but just opening up the conversation to understand the differences between men and women, I think, is the first step. It's perfectly a growth mindset thing because you have to accept talking about, both of us in the same room.
I fully hear you. There's so many points there. I wanted to jump in, but I was like, she's got more to say. I need to say, no. But I mean, firstly, I kind of think women are better CEOs than men because they're empathetic, generally speaking, more so. They're more organized and they're better communicators, which I think is just awesome. Like men, I just don't think they're as good as these things.
Yeah, but men might be better CTOs because they get to the crux of the problem and they like focus in on it and they know exactly, they fix it in a very efficient, effective way, and they like just get it done.
Definitely.
So,
when it comes to funding, definitely more female orientated. The way I do, I definitely prefer to sort of. I don't like being so bullish on stuff. I am a bit more reserved and like when I have like all the proof points and all my boxes ticked, and like I don't sort of go like, this is what is going to be amazing. I'm like, well, this is what we're doing, and it could work, and like it might not work, and but like, I'm a bit more reserved about these things. I've never been like a salesy person and such, which I don't think is such a natural women's trait either. And we are a bit more like reasonable about what we ask for and stuff, which you sort of need to be.
And then you're like, well, maybe I need to be a bit more aggressive.
When you're competing with like a bunch of other people to get money with a really aggressive attitude, it doesn't do you so many favors, which is something I'm trying to like work out how to get right. But well, when you figure it out, let me know, and if I figure it out, I'll let you know. For sure. I mean, on a completely different question, can I ever come to any female-based dinner things if I wear a dress? Does that make me allowed?
Absolutely.
Yes. Cool.
Yes.
I want to start wearing more dresses. I also feel like it's kind of fun. Yeah. Probably.
It's fun.
You said 11:30, right?
Yes, I've got to run. But thank you so much,
Okay, so you definitely have to leave. There were other questions, but thanks. This is super awesome. You're great.
Well, if it's not enough, I'm happy to jump on with you again for another, half an hour or something. If there's anything else, shoot me an email and we can always fit it in.
Cool. Nice. Well, thanks so much.
Thank you. Keep in touch.
Thank you for joining us this week on the Growth Mindset podcast. Before you head on to another episode, what's your biggest aha moment from today's discussion? You can share with us your insights and join us on Reason FM. Reason FM is a social podcasting app and the best way to discover new podcasts, connect with hosts and other listeners. Also, don't forget to tune into the Wiser Than Yesterday podcast with me and my co-host Nico, and we expose you to a different perspective and dive into the world's most thought-provoking and inspiring books. That's all for this episode, and with that, keep learning and keep growing.